Have you ever met a child who was told, from a very early age, that they were special, that they were gifted, that they were smarter than the other kids, more capable, more promising, destined for something bigger than ordinary? And have you noticed what sometimes happens to that child 20 years later? They are still promising, still capable, still intelligent in ways that are genuinely visible to everyone around them, and still, somehow, waiting, still planning, still not quite there yet, still carrying a dream that has been vivid and detailed and entirely stationary for longer than anyone will say out loud. Psychology says this is not a coincidence. It is a consequence, a specific, documented, deeply ironic consequence of something that was done to that child with the very best intentions. The first thing that happens in this experience is that the child learns that intelligence is who they are, rather than something they do. This is the foundational error from which everything else follows. When a child is consistently praised for being smart, for being gifted, for being naturally talented, the brain constructs an identity around those qualities. Not a skill identity, not a doing identity, but a being identity. I am the smart one. And this distinction, which sounds philosophical, turns out to be one of the most consequential things that can happen to a developing mind, because a skill can be practiced and improved and applied. But an identity must be protected. And a child who has built their entire self-concept on being the intelligent one faces a threat that most adults around them never fully understood. Every challenge becomes not a chance to grow, but a test of whether the identity is real, and tests can be failed. And a failed test does not just mean they got the answer wrong. It means the most important thing they believe about themselves might not be true. The second thing that happens is that the child stops taking risks that might contradict the story. This is what psychologist Carol Dweck spent decades documenting in her research on mindset, and it is among the most important findings in 20th century developmental psychology. Children praised for intelligence, as distinct from children praised for effort, consistently chose easier tasks. When given a choice, they avoided challenges that might expose limitations. They preferred to perform well on something straightforward over struggling visibly with something genuinely difficult. And they had a very rational reason for this preference. A reason their nervous system had calculated before they had words for it. If my value is my intelligence, and my intelligence is proven by getting things right, then the safest strategy is to only attempt things I am likely to get right. The dream becomes enormous because the dream costs nothing. The action remains absent, because action carries the one risk the gifted child was never taught to tolerate. The risk of being visibly, measurably, publicly, not as capable as everyone believed. The third thing that happens is that praise becomes the primary source of motivation, and effort becomes associated with insufficiency. This is one of the most damaging dynamics in the psychology of gifted children, and one of the least examined. When things come easily, when understanding arrives quickly, when performance is effortless, the child learns that this is what it feels like to be good at something. And then they encounter something that requires real effort. Something that doesn't come immediately, something that requires struggle and repetition, and the uncomfortable experience of not yet being competent. And the effort itself becomes alarming. Because if I have to work hard at this, maybe I am not as capable as everyone thought. Maybe the intelligence they praised was limited to this particular kind of task. Effort stops being the path to mastery and starts being evidence of inadequacy. And so the child avoids effort. And the adult that child becomes avoids the specific kind of effort that might reveal that the potential everyone celebrated was not unlimited after all. The fourth thing that happens is that the child builds an elaborate relationship with the future as a place where their potential will finally be realized. This is perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated adaptation in the entire pattern. Because the future is safe, in a way, the present is not. In the future, intelligence will be demonstrated fully. In the future, the circumstances will be right. In the future, the plan will be complete, and the resources will be sufficient, and the moment will finally arrive that matches the scale of what everyone always said they were capable of. The future becomes an address where the best version of themselves has already moved in and is waiting, and the present becomes a waiting room. And the child, and then the teenager, and then the adult, waits with remarkable patience for a future that is always exactly one more preparation away from being ready to receive them. The fifth thing that happens is that the adults around the gifted child inadvertently confirm that potential is the most important thing. They say things like, "You could do anything you set your mind to." They say the sky is the limit. They marvel at what the child might become. And all of this is loving and well-intentioned and also quietly catastrophic. Because the message underneath it, the message the developing nervous system absorbs, is that the potential is the thing of value, not the output, not the effort, not the imperfect, incremental, often unglamorous process of actually building something real, the potential. And a person who has been taught since childhood that their potential is their most precious asset will do what anyone does with their most precious asset. They will protect it. They will keep it somewhere safe. They will not risk it on something that might not work. And potential that is never tested is potential that never becomes anything. If you have recognized something in this, something about yourself or someone close to you, something that has never quite been named before, this channel is exactly where you should be. We take the psychological patterns that shape people's lives in ways they rarely get to examine clearly, and we give them the language they deserve. Subscribe if you haven't already, because what comes next is the part that stays with people the longest. The part about what this childhood experience costs across a lifetime, and what, if anything, can actually interrupt it. The sixth thing that happens is that failure becomes existential rather than informational. For most people, failure is data. It tells you something didn't work. It points you toward an adjustment. It is uncomfortable, and then it is useful. But for the child who was taught that their intelligence is their identity, failure is not data. It is a verdict. It says something not about what they tried, but about who they are. And a mind that has learned to experience failure as a verdict on its own nature will do everything available to it to avoid the experience. It will choose not to try over trying and falling short. It will construct sophisticated reasons why the timing is wrong. It will stay in the planning phase indefinitely, because a plan cannot fail in the way an executed attempt can fail. And it will do all of this automatically, efficiently, and with a level of psychological sophistication that makes the avoidance almost impossible to distinguish from wisdom from the inside. The seventh thing that happens is that the gifted child rarely learns that struggle is part of competence rather than evidence against it. The experiences that build genuine resilience, the repeated encounter with difficulty, the practice of continuing in the absence of natural facility, the discovery that effort over time produces capability that ease never could. These experiences are often unavailable to the child, for whom things came naturally. They were moved to harder material before they had the chance to struggle with easier material long enough to learn what struggling teaches. And so they arrived at adulthood, with exceptional intellectual capacity and almost no practice at the specific psychological skill that achievement requires above all others. The ability to be bad at something for long enough to become good at it without letting the badness mean something it doesn't mean. The eighth thing that happens, and this is the one that most quietly determines everything else, is that the gifted child learns that being seen as capable is more important than being capable. The praise was social. It happened in front of people. It shaped how others looked at them and how they understood themselves to be seen. And the brain, which is profoundly social by design, encoded that lesson deeply. Being perceived as intelligent and promising became something to maintain, a reputation to protect, an image that required careful management. And the most reliable way to manage it is to never produce anything that could be evaluated against it, because evaluation is risky. And risk is the one thing the identity was never designed to absorb. Here is what psychology ultimately wants to say about the child in this story and the adult they became. You were not failed by your intelligence. You were failed by how the people around you related to your intelligence. They loved it in you as a fixed thing when they should have loved what you did with it as a growing one. They celebrated what you were when they should have celebrated what you attempted. They protected the potential when they should have helped you spend it. And the pattern that formed in response to their love, because it was love, is not a character flaw. It is a completely coherent adaptation to the environment you were given. But here is also what is true. The environment changed. You are not a child anymore, waiting for the adults to tell you whether the risk is worth taking. The dream that has been living in the future for all these years is not evidence of what you will never do. It is evidence of what you have always cared about. And caring, directed finally toward action rather than protection, is not too late. It was never about talent. It was never about potential. It was always about the willingness to let something be seen before it is finished, before it is safe, before anyone can confirm it is as good as you always hoped it would be. That willingness is not something you were born with or without. It is something you practice, one uncomfortable, imperfect, genuinely risky attempt at a time. Hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.